Ex-husband and his mistress went to a party and unexpectedly ran into his stunning ex-wife. He thought he had erased her completely. When corporate titan Desmond Blackwood traded his wife Vivien for a younger model, he expected her to fade into obscurity like a discarded photograph. Tonight, he arrives at the most exclusive gala in Manhattan with his trophy girlfriend Chloe, expecting to reign supreme. But a vision from his past materializes across the crowded ballroom, and she's not the broken woman he remembers. Vivien is back, radiant and commanding attention in ways that make his blood run cold. This isn't just a chance encounter. This is a reckoning, years in the making. The silence in Vivien's Soho loft was different tonight. For 18 months since her divorce from Desmond had been finalized, this silence had been her sanctuary and her prison. It echoed off exposed brick walls and polished concrete floors, bouncing between floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like an ever-changing art installation. The space was everything Desmond would have hated: artistic, unconventional, alive with creative energy instead of corporate sterility. Tonight, that silence felt pregnant with possibility. Draped across her vintage velvet chaise lounge was a gown the color of deep emerald, hand-beaded with crystals that caught light like captured stars. It was a custom piece from an up-and-coming designer whose career Vivien had quietly championed, a designer Desmond would have dismissed as too avant-garde for serious people. The invitation beside it was printed on heavyweight paper with gold foil lettering: the annual Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala, an event she and Desmond had once attended together, an event she had every reason to avoid. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, had called it reclaiming your narrative during their last session. You can't let fear of his presence dictate your choices forever, Vivien. That's just another form of his control. What would you do if you had to face the person who destroyed your world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. For 5 years, Vivien had been Mrs. Desmond Blackwood, wife to the real estate mogul who owned half of Manhattan's skyline. She had been the perfect corporate wife, elegant at galas, charming at business dinners, quietly supportive of his ruthless ambition. She had molded herself into his vision of the ideal partner, sanding down her own edges until she fit perfectly into his minimalist world. Desmond hadn't just left her for Chloe Morrison, his 26-year-old marketing director. He had systematically destroyed her confidence first, making her believe she was the problem. You're too emotional, Vivien, too creative. Successful men need partners who understand the game. The game apparently didn't include her passion for art curation or her dreams of opening her own gallery. When she'd discovered his affair through a carelessly left email chain, he hadn't even apologized. Chloe gets it, Viv. She's hungry, ambitious. She makes me better. As if Vivien's love and loyalty had somehow made him worse. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Desmond's lawyers, sharks in $1,000 suits, had painted her as an unstable woman living in fantasy. Her own attorney had advised her to take the settlement and disappear quietly. Don't give him ammunition to destroy you publicly. So she had taken the money, signed the papers, and vanished from their shared world like morning mist. But that world, it turned out, had missed her more than anyone expected. Vivien walked to her window, the city sprawling beneath her like a circuit board of dreams and ambitions. She had spent 18 months rebuilding not just her life, but her soul. She'd started small, pottery classes where her hands remembered how to create instead of just maintain. Art galleries where she rediscovered her eye for beauty. Yoga sessions where she learned to inhabit her body without apology. Then bigger things. She'd quietly purchased a small gallery space in Chelsea, using her maiden name, Vivien Sterling. She'd begun representing emerging artists, the kind of raw, emotional work Desmond had always dismissed. Her first show had sold out. Her second had been reviewed in Art Forum. Her third had attracted collectors from Los Angeles and Miami. She was building something that was entirely hers. The gala invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago. Vivien Sterling, gallery owner. It read. Not Mrs. Desmond Blackwood, not Desmond's ex-wife, just Vivien, standing on her own merits. She'd almost thrown it away. Almost. Instead, She'd called the designer and commissioned the emerald gown. She'd made an appointment with the city's most exclusive stylist. She'd done something she hadn't done in years. She'd prepared to be seen, not as Desmond's discarded wife, as herself. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second acts, because what happens next will remind you that the best revenge is a life well lived. The elevator doors of the Plaza Hotel opened to reveal controlled chaos. Manhattan's cultural elite moved through the marble lobby like schools of expensive fish, their voices creating a symphony of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. This was a world Vivien had once navigated with practiced ease, a world that had collectively turned its back on her when Desmond had decided she was no longer useful. Tonight, she would remind them who she had always been. The emerald gown moved like liquid silk as she walked, its deep color making her auburn hair look like burnished copper. She had chosen nude makeup that let her natural beauty shine through, a stark contrast to the heavy glamour most women favored at these events. Her only jewelry was her grandmother's emerald earrings, real stones that had survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and now this. As she entered the ballroom, heads turned, conversations paused mid-sentence. She saw the flicker of recognition in familiar faces, followed by surprise, then something that looked dangerously close to respect. This was not the broken woman they had expected. She approached the bar with measured steps, her posture straight, her smile serene. The bartender, a young man with kind eyes, handed her a glass of champagne without being asked. "You look like you could use something steady," he said quietly. "That obvious?" she asked, accepting the glass gratefully. "Only to someone who's been watching the room react to you," he replied with a grin. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Half these people look like they've seen a ghost." Vivien took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles settle her nerves. Maybe they have. Vivien Sterling. She turned to find Eleanor Whitman, the Metropolitan Museum's chief curator, approaching with genuine warmth. Eleanor was a formidable woman in her 60s who had known Vivien since her gallery days, long before Desmond. "Eleanor," Vivien said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's wonderful to see you." "My dear, you look absolutely radiant," Eleanor said, her eyes taking in the transformation with approval. "I've been following your work at the Sterling Gallery. That exhibition of emerging Latin American artists was extraordinary. The Times Review barely did it justice." Vivien felt warmth spread through her chest. In her old life, her artistic opinions had been politely dismissed as charming hobbies. Here was one of the art world's most respected voices praising her professional judgment. "Thank you. That means the world coming from you. I hope you'll consider collaborating with us on the Spring Contemporary exhibit," Eleanor continued. "We need someone with your eye for emerging talent." Before Vivien could respond, Eleanor's expression shifted slightly. Her gaze moved to something over Vivien's shoulder, and her smile became more guarded. "Well," Eleanor said quietly, "the evening just became more interesting." Vivien didn't need to turn around. She could feel the shift in the room's energy, the way conversations became more animated, more performative. Desmond had arrived. The collision that was about to happen would change everything. Desmond Blackwood entered the ballroom like a conquering emperor returning to Rome. At 42, he was still devastatingly handsome in the way that money and confidence could make any man attractive. His tuxedo was cut to perfection, his silver-touched hair styled precisely, his smile the practiced expression of someone who owned the world. On his arm was Chloe Morrison, a stunning blonde whose youth and ambition radiated from her like heat from a flame. She wore red, always red, as if she needed to announce her presence to every room. Her dress was cut low and high, designed to remind everyone that she was young, beautiful, and had won the ultimate prize, Desmond Blackwood's attention. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting greetings and congratulations. Desmond's latest development project had just been approved, a massive complex that would reshape the downtown skyline. Tonight was his victory lap. "Darling, you haven't introduced me to half these people," Chloe pouted, her voice carrying the slight whine of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "Patience, sweetheart," Desmond murmured, his hand possessive on her waist. "We'll make the rounds. Everyone worth knowing will come to us eventually." It was then that his gaze swept the room in his habitual survey of his domain, cataloging who was present, who mattered, who could be useful. His eyes passed over familiar faces, potential business partners, social climbers hoping for his acknowledgement. And then they found her. The champagne glass in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. His smile froze, then slowly dissolved. For a moment that lasted an eternity, Desmond Blackwood looked like a man who had seen the dead rise. Vivien stood by the bar, laughing at something Eleanor was saying. The sound of her laughter, genuine, unguarded, happy, cut through him like a blade. This was not the woman he had left. The woman he had left wore beige and spoke in whispers and apologized for taking up space. This woman commanded the room without effort, drew eyes like a magnet, radiated confidence he had spent years convincing her she didn't possess. She was magnificent, and she was supposed to be erased. "Desmond?" Chloe's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Desmond, what are you looking at?" He couldn't answer, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because across the room, Vivien had turned, and her eyes had found his. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The ballroom full of Manhattan's elite faded away, leaving just the two of them suspended in a moment that contained the entire history of their love and destruction. Vivien's expression was unreadable. No pain, no anger, no longing. Just a calm, steady gaze that seemed to look right through him to some truth he had spent years trying to avoid. Then she smiled. A small, polite smile that somehow managed to be more devastating than any tears or accusations could have been. She lifted her champagne glass in a tiny toast, to what, he couldn't tell, and turned back to Eleanor as if he were nothing more than another face in the crowd. It was Chloe's sharp intake of breath that broke the spell. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice suddenly vicious. "That's her. That's your ex-wife. What happens when the woman you thought you destroyed shows up looking like she never needed you at all?" The first rule of high society warfare is never let them see you sweat. Desmond had built an empire on his ability to control any situation, to read any room, to emerge victorious from any conflict. But as he watched Vivien move through the crowd with effortless grace, accepting greetings and air kisses from people who had once snubbed her, he felt his carefully constructed world tilting off its axis. "She looks different," Chloe said, her voice tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Older." But that wasn't what Desmond was thinking. Vivien didn't look older. She looked like herself. The real self she had been before he had spent years teaching her to diminish herself. She looked like the woman he had fallen in love with at a gallery opening 8 years ago, when she had argued passionately about a controversial installation while everyone else made polite small talk. He had loved that passion once. Then he had decided it was inconvenient. "Who is she talking to?" Chloe demanded, her grip tightening on his arm. Desmond forced himself to focus. Vivien was deep in conversation with Dr. Marcus Webb, the hospital foundation's director. Then she moved to greet the Vanderbilt heir, followed by the tech billionaire who had just donated $50 million to arts education. She wasn't working the room. She belonged in it. "How does she know all these people?" Chloe's voice was rising in pitch, drawing unwanted attention. "She's always known them," Desmond said quietly, the truth tasting bitter in his mouth. "I just made her forget she did." A memory surfaced unbidden. Vivien at another gala, years ago, presenting a passionate case for funding arts programs in underserved schools. She had been eloquent, persuasive, brilliant. Afterward, he had told her she had talked too much, made herself too prominent. "Let me handle the serious conversations, Viv. You're better at the personal connections." He had been systematically silencing her for years, and he was only now realizing it. "Well, we need to go over there," Chloe announced, already beginning to move. "We need to establish dominance." Show everyone that you've moved on to better things. Desmond caught her arm, stopping her mid-stride. We're not doing anything. We're going to mingle, work the room, and pretend she doesn't exist. But it was too late for that strategy. The room was electric with anticipation. Everyone could feel the tension, the promise of drama. In a world where entertainment came in the form of social destruction, the unexpected reunion of Desmond Blackwood and his ex-wife was the evening's main event, and then Vivien began walking toward them. She moved like a queen approaching her subjects, her emerald gown flowing around her, her head held high. Conversations quieted as she passed, phone cameras discreetly lifted. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for without knowing it. Desmond felt his pulse hammering in his throat. Beside him, Chloe had gone rigid with fury and fear. They were trapped, pinned like insects in amber, with nowhere to run and no choice but to face the reckoning they had never seen coming. "Desmond," Vivien said when she reached them, her voice warm and perfectly modulated. "How lovely to see you." The words were polite, appropriate, exactly what any civilized ex-spouse might say. But her tone carried something else. A confidence that suggested she held all the cards and was merely deciding which ones to play. "Vivien." His own voice sounded foreign to his ears. "You look—" He struggled for words that wouldn't give away how completely she had blindsided him. "Well, you look well." "I am well," she replied simply. "Remarkably well, actually." She turned to Chloe with a smile that could have powered the city. "And you must be Chloe. I've heard so much about you." Chloe's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. In her red dress and dramatic makeup, she suddenly looked like a child playing dress-up next to Vivien's effortless sophistication. Yes, yes, I'm Chloe Morrison." "How lovely," Vivien said, and somehow made the simple words sound like both a blessing and a dismissal. "I understand congratulations are in order on Desmond's latest project. The downtown development must be quite the feather in your cap." There it was, the first subtle blade. By addressing the congratulations to Chloe, Vivien had implied that she, not Desmond, was the driving force behind his success. It was a masterful stroke that left Chloe glowing with pride and Desmond feeling somehow diminished. "It was a team effort," Desmond said quickly, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Of course it was," Vivien agreed smoothly. "You always were wonderful at recognizing talent and utilizing it effectively." The words were perfectly innocent. The subtext was devastating. Everyone within earshot would understand that she was referring to more than business strategy. This is what happens when a woman stops playing by rules designed to keep her small. Chloe, finally finding her voice, decided to go on the offensive. "Desmond has told me so much about you, about your artistic pursuits. It must be so fulfilling to have hobbies that keep you busy." It was a clumsy attack, the kind of patronizing dismissal that might have wounded the old Vivien. This Vivien simply smiled wider. "Hobbies. Yes, I suppose you could call them that." She paused, letting the moment build. "Though the Guggenheim seemed to think my last exhibition was significant enough to acquire 3 pieces for their permanent collection. But then, I've always believed that what some people call hobbies, others recognize as callings." The gathered crowd, because there was definitely a crowd now, pretending to mingle while hanging on every word, barely suppressed their gasps. The Guggenheim acquisition was major news in the art world, the kind of validation that transformed careers. Desmond felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. This wasn't the woman he had left. This was the woman she had always been, before he had convinced her she was less than she was. "That's impressive," he managed. "Isn't it?" Vivien's smile never wavered. "I have to thank you, actually. The divorce settlement gave me the freedom to pursue my true passion without worrying about practical considerations. It's amazing what a woman can accomplish when she's not constantly being told her dreams are impractical." Another perfect strike. She had just publicly thanked him for enabling her success, while simultaneously revealing that he had been the one holding her back. The crowd was eating it up. Chloe, red-faced with fury, made one last desperate play. Well, some of us prefer to support our partner's dreams rather than compete with them. Vivien's laugh was like silver bells ringing. Oh, my dear, I was never competing with Desmond. Competition implies we were playing the same game. She turned back to Desmond, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. He saw something in her eyes, not anger, not hurt, but pity. She pitied him. I should let you get back to your evening, she said gently. I know how important these events are for networking. And Chloe, it was lovely to meet you. Enjoy the rest of your night. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own making. The crowd began to disperse, whispers following in her wake like leaves in a hurricane. Desmond stood frozen, watching her go. Somewhere in his chest, something that had been locked away for years was struggling to break free. It felt suspiciously like regret. When you realize you didn't lose your wife, you lost yourself. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of strained conversations and forced smiles. Desmond went through the motions of working the room, but his attention kept drifting to Vivien. She was everywhere and nowhere, seeming to float through the crowd like a social butterfly who had never been trapped in a cocoon. He watched her laugh with the museum director, deep in animated conversation about some upcoming exhibition. He saw her console a young artist who looked overwhelmed by the crowd, taking genuine interest in his work. He observed her gracefully deflecting the questions about their encounter, never stooping to gossip while somehow managing to elevate herself above the fray. This was the woman he had convinced himself was holding him back. This woman who commanded respect without demanding it, who moved through his world with more natural grace than he had ever possessed. She's really gotten to you, hasn't she? Chloe's voice cut through his reverie. She had been growing more tense as the evening progressed, her earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like panic. Don't be ridiculous, Desmond said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm not blind, Desmond. You've been watching her all night like she's some kind of goddess who descended from heaven to judge us mere mortals. There was truth in her words that he wasn't ready to acknowledge. She's my ex-wife. Of course I'm aware of her presence. She humiliated us, Chloe hissed, her voice rising in pitch. She made us look like fools, and you're standing there acting like she won some kind of prize. She did win, Desmond said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Chloe's face went white, then red. Excuse me? Look at her, Chloe. Really look at her. She's successful, respected, happy. She's everything I told her she couldn't be, and she's achieved it all without me. She won. So what does that make us? Chloe's voice was shaking now. What does that make me? Desmond looked at the woman he had left his wife for. Beautiful, ambitious, young. Everything he had thought he wanted. But standing here now, watching Vivien shine like a star he had tried to extinguish, he felt only emptiness. I don't know, he said honestly. It was the wrong answer. Chloe's face crumpled, then hardened into something ugly. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with your baggage, your ex-wife, your inability to appreciate what you have standing right in front of you. She pulled off the diamond bracelet he had given her for her birthday and dropped it on the floor between them. Find yourself a therapist, Desmond. Or better yet, find yourself a time machine. Because I'm not going to stand around waiting for you to get over a woman who clearly got over you years ago. She turned and stalked away, her red dress a banner of wounded pride. Several people had witnessed the scene, their faces showing various degrees of shock and barely concealed delight. Desmond Blackwood, master of the universe, was having his second public humiliation of the evening. He stood alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, and feeling more isolated than he had ever felt in his life. The success he had built, the empire he had constructed, the image he had crafted, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Across the room, Vivien was saying her goodbyes, accepting cheek kisses and promises to lunch soon. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went, who carried her own sense of worth with her like a favorite piece of jewelry. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up, and their eyes met one final time. This time, there was no polite smile, no social mask. Just a moment of pure recognition between two people who had once loved each other and had somehow lost their way. She inclined her head slightly, not quite a nod, not quite a bow, but something that felt like closure. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her emerald gown catching the light one last time before disappearing into the night. Desmond remained where he was, watching the space where she had been, feeling the weight of everything he had lost and everything he would never get back. Sometimes the price of getting everything you thought you wanted is losing everything that actually mattered. 6 months later, the Sterling Gallery was hosting its most ambitious exhibition yet. The Chelsea space had been transformed into a wonderland of contemporary art featuring emerging artists from around the world. Vivien moved through the space like a conductor guiding an orchestra, ensuring everything flowed smoothly. She wore black tonight, a simple, elegant dress that let the art be the star. "Vivien, this is extraordinary," Eleanor Whitman said, approaching with genuine admiration. "The way you've curated this space, it's masterful." "Thank you," Vivien replied, accepting the compliment with grace. "I wanted to create a conversation between the works." As Eleanor moved on, Vivien allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. This was what she had been meant to do all along. "Excuse me, Ms. Sterling." A young man nervously held his wine glass. "I'm Marcus Rivera. My piece is by the east wall." Vivien's face lit up. "Marcus, your work is absolutely stunning. The way you've incorporated found objects with traditional painting, it's revolutionary." She was so focused on the conversation that she almost missed the familiar figure in the doorway. Desmond Blackwood stood at the entrance, not advancing, but not leaving either. He wore a simple navy suit, and his expression was carefully neutral. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Vivien felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just mild curiosity. She excused herself and walked toward the entrance. "Desmond," she said when she reached him, "this is unexpected." "I hope you don't mind," he said quietly. "I read about the exhibition. I wanted to see what you'd built." His voice was different, smaller somehow, less certain. "Of course not. You're welcome here." He stepped inside, taking in the carefully curated works, the sophisticated lighting. "It's remarkable, Vivien. All of this. I had no idea you had this kind of vision." "You never asked," she said simply, without rancor. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the crowd move through the space. "I owe you an apology," Desmond said finally, "for not seeing who you really were, for trying to make you smaller instead of celebrating how magnificent you already were." Vivien studied his face, seeing lines that hadn't been there during their marriage. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "But you don't need my forgiveness, Desmond. You need your own." It was perhaps the kindest thing she could have said, and the most devastating. "Are you happy?" he asked, something almost vulnerable in the question. Vivien looked around her gallery, at the art she had championed, at the life she had built with her own vision. "Yes," she said simply. "I really am." Desmond nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Not just the gallery, but you, like this, in your element." "But you see it now," Vivien said gently. "That's something." After he left, Vivien returned to her guests, to her artists, to her life. She didn't watch him go, didn't wonder if she'd see him again. She simply returned to the work she loved. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. Sometimes the best way to win is to simply become so authentically yourself that the past loses all power over your present. And sometimes the woman who gets left behind becomes the woman who was always supposed to be free. What do you think about Vivien's journey from shadow to spotlight? Could you relate to her transformation and quiet triumph? Let us know in the comments below. If this story of reinvention and self-discovery resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, redemption, and the incredible power of becoming exactly who you were meant to be. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Remember, your worth isn't determined by who stays or who leaves. It's determined by who you choose to become when you finally stop trying to be someone else's version of perfect.